Hello, and welcome to Unsheathed with your hosts, Kyle Gold and Cam Hirosaki. We hope that you enjoy the program. Please stick around afterwards. There'll be cake and blowjobs.
Hi, welcome to Unsheathed episode 85. I'm visible by 17, Kyle Gold.
And I am not a prime number, Cam Hirosaki.
It's been a while since I've flustered you with the introductions.
I know, I've been good about it. Usually I make a special point to not crack before I even say my first word, but the conversation we had about just the episode title before, or the episode number before this was still fresh in my mind.
Yeah, that was entertaining. Too bad it didn't make it onto tape, but...
Yep.
So we're here. This is probably not going to go out before Anthrocon. So, right. So, we will talk a little bit about what's going to happen at Comic-Con, which you guys will still have time to get to by the time we release this one.
At least a couple of weeks.
Yeah. So we'll have a booth at Comic-Con. If you were not able to make it out to Anthrocon for the release of Across the Thin Ice, we're very excited about that. Blots are good friends of the podcast, and we're excited to see this project come to fruition. We'd seen a lot of the early stages. Of course, many people have seen the art. We talked to them a little bit about the story, and we're really convinced it's going to be a good story.
I just remember hearing them talk about the research they put into it and the amusing things they just came across while looking into it.
Oh, yeah. It was... they've done a lot of work, and it really shows. We've got... So anyway, I will be down at Comic-Con. They will be there at Comic-Con also. I'll be down there for a couple of days. Probably not the whole thing. But we are looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun time. Comic-Con appears to be always entertaining and huge and overwhelming. So that's always good. And then a few weeks after that, we've got Rocky Mountain Fur Con. I just recently finished up the book that we're going to put out there.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a compilation of short stories in the world of the League of Canids. So the 3 stories that have already been published are in it. The 1 story that I already put up online is in it. Those are Don't Blink, Third Date, Stop the World, and Modern History. And there are also 3 brand new stories that have never seen the light of day before. But you have seen them, actually.
Yes.
And
although I actually I didn't get to read one of them because I was cleaning up my little office yesterday and I found the printout for it. I'm like, oh god, I never read this.
Aw.
So I need to do that. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I read the last. You did get my feedback. That's right. Never. Sorry.
Yep. So I'm kind of excited about that. I like exploring relationships, and I love superheroes, and I grew up with superhero comics, and even then got into them again later on when they started being more in-depth and thoughtful, things like Watchmen and Kingdom Come and Astro City, stuff like that, where they kind of explore what it means to be a person and a superhero. So I think it'll be cool. It goes well with the Rocky Mountain theme, which is I Need a Hero. And the art is being done by Ammon Omega, who is also a friend of the podcast.
Yes.
He is
if you were at Rainforest last year, didn't we do the thing with his art?
Did we?
Yeah. We had the video.
Oh, right. He worked on the Out of Position music video.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm not crazy.
No, I thought you were leading up to him being there.
No,
he's not been to any of the conventions. But he's cool. His work also illustrates my story in Heat number 8, and he brought that same great cartoony style, and he really took to this project. He liked it quite a bit. One of the things that I did for it, as I think I might have mentioned already, is I made it much less explicit. It's still got mature situations in that, like, modern history is basically about a blowjob, and there's no way to hide that.
Yeah.
I sort of toned it down a bit, and Ammon, who had not seen the explicit version, said that he thought the toned down version still worked well, and they didn't bother him too much.
Did you actually search and replace and put the word cake in?
No, I should have done that. But Ammon actually did, for that story, a picture which is not explicit, but which leaves really no doubt as to what's going on. And I felt a little uncomfortable including the whole picture in the book, so I cropped the bottom a little bit. So what I'm planning to do eventually is I'll, like sometime next year, I'll put together an ebook, and I'll put together an ebook of the text as printed, which will be sort of the,
standard version.
PG-13 or R-rated, I guess, R-rated version. But then I'll also put together a version with the more explicit text, and I might write an extra. There's the one news story has certainly a place where I could put a little bit more explicit stuff. So I might do that, and then just release an explicit version with. Maybe by that point I could convince Amazon to do maybe one more picture for it. So we'll see. I'm trying to make the works a little more accessible because although people do tell me that they enjoy the sexual aspects of my work, and I enjoy writing that part of it, people also have said, wow, if your work didn't have that in it, I could recommend it to more people. So, trying to do something, this may ultimately be a failure because it's too sexual for the mainstream still, even without the explicit stuff. It might be, but then it might be not explicit enough for the people who want it, so...
Speaking of which, actually...
We'll see how it goes.
And I meant to talk to you about this last night, but I didn't see you online. Did you see the latest page of Red Lantern that Rick has posted?
Yeah.
Which here's the censored page. I'm just like, if you hadn't told me this was censored, I never would have guessed.
Yeah, no, I think...
And I'm just like, I love how by furry standards, this is the tame and clean version.
Yeah. And someone actually called her on that if you looked at the comments.
Oh, yeah?
They were like, I don't want to criticize your censoring, but it looks like you missed a few bits. And she was like, no, just partially showing sheets don't count as something that needs to be censored in my book. There's a speech bubble in, I think, the last panel, I think is what she's talking about.
Yeah, but I'm just sort of given how, sensual, the content of the entire page is, if a bit of an erect penis in the last panel is what you really need to find the whole rest of it sexy, then I feel bad for your imagination.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah.
It actually was. She's I've been impressed with her ability to put together the story in that one, as well as get some art. And she's said all along that the internet version is going to be censored, but I don't think she'd gotten to a point yet where there was anything to censor. So I think this part coming up is what she was talking about. Coincidentally, this discussion leads right into all of our questions.
It does.
And we do have example pitches to give for the pitch session, which Kit is putting together later on in the summer, but I think we can maybe do those at the end.
Yeah, because we have such a good flow talking about sex right now.
Exactly.
Which we've forgotten to talk about for 60 episodes.
I know, right? So we've got, we'll do our pitches at the end of the show, so keep listening, and let's get started with our questions.
Okay. Am I starting?
Sure.
Okay. Greetings, Sheafers. I've been trying desperately to catch up with the podcast and also to find a good red wine that I enjoy that's not from Australia. Been moderately more successful with the former than the latter, though Hirosaki-san has given me a list of U.S. vineyards to sample, and I haven't looked for any of those yet. Well, then get on that. But don't worry, me and Kit will help you in a few weeks. However, I am caught up with enough of the podcast to hear your vow to make the show more adult-oriented in episode 70. I am here to help. And once again, we show our reputation for not getting to things in a timely manner.
15 episodes later.
And also, who knows when he listened to episode 70?
That's a good point.
Yeah. My friend Rikoshi and I were talking online a bit ago, and we were comparing and contrasting stories that we were familiar with. For whatever reason, we started talking about Summerhill, which I obviously have never read, not sure if Rikoshi has. He has. He's part of the writing group. We eventually started poking fun at the supposed 3,000-word sex scene in the story. The conversation made me curious, and I pulled up one of my longer stories, which has what is most likely my longest intimate scene in any of my work, and I copied the scene into a new document and checked the word count. My longest scene is in fact very nearly 10,000 words, which is the dominant scene in a 50,000-word story.
I just want to kind of break in here and say, in most current word processing programs, you can just select a whole block of text and then do word count, and it'll give you the word count in the selected text. You don't have to create a new document.
I was just thinking the same thing. Yeah. Which prompts the question, how long is too long? Is it possible that, no matter how well written, there's a cap to how long a sex scene should be? Sex scenes can obviously be as short as, he stuck his sex in their sex and they had sex. I like how you made that gender neutral. It's gender ambiguous. He stuck his sex in their sex. Shouldn't it be in their sexes? Sorry.
No, it's singular ambiguous.
Yes, clone sex, call foosball. But I was wondering what your opinions on the opposite extreme might be. Also, it seems that 3,000 might be Hirosaki-san's best. How about you, Kyle? How many words is your longest?
That's a rather personal question.
I have high hopes this email might stir up some length envy. Word length, that is. Wags all around, TJ Fulf.
So I polled a couple people, that is to say one person, because I was talking with Foosball this morning anyway, and he was writing smut online on his live stream. If you've not yet checked it out, follow Foosball on Twitter. That's FOOZZBALL. And he has been live streaming writing, which is really interesting. I don't know if I could do that.
I don't think I could either.
But he has found it.
My writing process is so boring, I don't know if anyone would want to watch it.
Well, he's found that when there are people waiting for him to produce words, he feels like he has more pressure to produce words and he writes more. He told me that he's been live streaming all this week, and he said this week is his highest word count ever for a week.
Wow, awesome.
So I asked him because he was online, and he said that his longest scene that he could find was in the environs of 2,500 words. Most of his tended to go from about, I want to say, 700 to 1,700.
Okay.
In that kind of 1,200 median range.
Right.
I did not go back through all of my stories. I went back through a couple that I've written recently, and one of them was about 1,100. One was 2,800, but that one involved a lot of dialogue during foreplay, so it wasn't from first moment of insertion, because the actual sex was like 2 paragraphs.
Yeah.
But there's like a ton of foreplay and discussion and touching and whatnot before, and then there's a whole lot of dialogue that happens afterwards while they're tied. So I was counting all of that. I was counting basically from the moment like naked sheath to untied, and that was 2,800 words. But that was that's pretty long for me.
Yeah.
Unless you count. Well, I wonder how long that story I did for Heat 6 was.
Oh, the one with the
that
phone.
One, because that one was like the whole story was one blowjob. So
yeah, I don't know.
I wonder if I have that. You talk a little bit. I'll see if I can find it.
I actually did some thinking, and and I dug up another story of mine that I had written, which is not online, but actually by the time this episode airs, it will have been released. But I did a count, and again, this starts from like beginning of foreplay to the sex is over. It's about 4,800 words, actually. But to be technical, it is like sex happens twice. Like the character has sex with 2 people, and so he sort of stops in the middle very briefly as like things get interrupted, and then he has sex with somebody else. It's not like just a giant 3-way scene. It's like sex with one person and then sex with another person while the other person is still in the room. And again, a lot of that is the whole like, they start making out and touching each other through their clothes, and I'm including that in there as well. Although there's still a lot of description about the actual, fucking and being fucked and all of that. But again, that's kind of like a double sex scene, so I'm not sure if that. I mean, it is all one scene, like from a writing standpoint. But so I mean, there's that. If I had to guess how long most of mine are, I'd have to probably say I probably hit in the 1,200 to 1,500 word range normally.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's just a guess. I haven't done any metrics for it, but that's sort of my impression if I sit here and think about it.
Yeah, I can't find that story that was in Heat. I don't think it's not on this computer, but there was another story that I wrote recently, the football story that I sold to the non-furry press.
Oh, them.
The sex scene in that one is 1,700, so ultimately, it's, I kind of feel like if it's going to go beyond about 2,000 words, there's going to have to be some other stuff happening. Either, like in your case, there's kind of a pause and then you switch configurations or something. Or, or the sex kind of continues while other stuff's going on. Like there's discussions or talking, or, you know, you could potentially count as there being a lot of foreplay and then, you know, trying to find a condom and the putting on of the condom and all that stuff. I mean, if you could extend a scene pretty well that way. Safe sex, kids. Again, your scene is as long as it needs to be.
Yeah, I find the one thing I do want to address here is because he talks about, you know, I have this 10,000 word sex scene in a 50,000 word story. The story I was just talking about where I had this 48,000 word sex scene, I mean, it's not even an 11,000 word story.
4,800.
Yeah. Whoa, sorry. Yeah, 4,800 words, sorry. Oh, God. Sorry. Vodka. No. The story itself is just under 11,000 words.
I would like to see you write a 48,000 word sex scene.
No, oh my God, no. Like my first two drafts of Summerhill aren't even that long. I don't know what I would go on about.
Now I'm kind of wondering if I could write one.
Oh, don't even try, please. But in
Chapter
that case,
1, the first thrust in.
But no, like
Chapter 2, the pull back out.
my point is, like,
on the chapter heads are just in, out, out.
Stuck. Squirm, wriggle.
Chapter 18, more lube, please.
Okay, before we degenerate into complete silliness.
Too late.
Yes. I mean, that's something, like 45% of the story is sex. I think that if you're writing what is a sex story, naturally you're going to have a different ratio than, here's my novel, and at 1 point or 2 points or whatever, people have sex.
Right.
You're going to have different ratios.
And I think, you know, honestly, as I was playing with writing in Scrivener, which allows you to break down your book into scenes, actually. Not kind of, and I'll stick with allowed. It almost forces you to do it. Mm-hmm. Like you separate out each chapter, and then you break down the scenes in each chapter, and then you write each scene as you go. Which gives you a good sort of visibility into how long each scene is. And my scenes generally tend to be between 1,000 and 2,000 words, no matter what's going on in them.
Yeah, likewise.
I had one sort of like the real long plot denouement scene was like 3,000 words. But generally, they would rarely fall under 1,000, and they would rarely go over 2,000. So most of the times, any scene is in that range.
If I'm writing a short story that's very briskly paced, and these tend to be my like first-person narratives that involve taking place over the course of a couple of days, and I'm just hitting like key conversations that the character has with certain people, then like I might have scenes that are as short as like, you know, like 700, 600 words, just really quick and short, or that it's like, and here's just like an interlude to explain what's going on between two bigger scenes.
Right.
I mean, that'll happen, but again, I'm not going to have that crop into a larger work.
All right. Well, I think we've talked long enough about scenes being long enough. I guess it's my turn.
And actually, I have an interesting thing to note, but it would actually make more sense to come after this next email. So,
all right. Next email. No greeting. Tisk tisk. I've been really enjoying the podcast and thought of a question recently after buying a few books for my new Kindle, among them Kyle's Bridges. Thank you. I've only listened to maybe a quarter of the episode so far, but I didn't hear this question asked or read it in any of the episode details, though I could have missed it. What's the difference between pornography and erotica? Is there a technical detail to the difference, or is it merely semantics? How does this affect selling ebooks online through distributors like Amazon that prohibit pornography but allow erotica? Are there certain well-defined lines that can't be crossed in the writing of a story before it's considered porn and not erotica? What are the legal details of calling it one thing or another? Exactly how much detail could you put into a blowjob scene, for example? I ask because personally I make little distinction between the two. If it gives me a boner, it gives me a boner, you know? Daneth Tiger.
This is a tricky question to answer because, like I said, a lot of it is largely semantics and it's very subjective. But again, you point out that Amazon allows erotica and prohibits pornography.
And I think Amazon prohibiting pornography mainly applies to pornographic images.
Yeah, I mean,
because there's no. I mean,
there's no body that governs this. There's not a group of people who reads all your stuff to make sure there's not too much sex in it.
Yeah, and honestly, if you were to ask people in the mainstream about like what constitutes pornography, I don't think most people would say that a written story without pictures could be pornography.
Yeah.
I think the act of writing a story about it makes it erotica. Because I've read stories in, Year's Best Erotica or Best Gay Erotica or whatever that were essentially pornography.
Yeah.
Like, I was serving on a Navy boat and I took the overnight shift because there weren't many guys there. And there was one guy who had always seemed to kind of like me, and we ended up on the overnight shift together, and he was wearing only his raincoat, and there was a terrible storm, and so
we fucked up on the gun mount.
Pretty much.
I said mount.
Yes. So, honestly, I can't think of any case that I've heard where a written story without images has been called pornography. Comics get called pornography a lot.
Yeah, that's true.
But you always have images. There's always images associated with it. And books, I should say, books have been called pornography, but not officially.
They are not legally defined as pornography.
Right. It's more like...
because I hear people accuse you of writing pornography all the time.
Oh, yeah. And people called Lolita pornography, too. So, not that I'm on a par with Nabokov, but...
No, but it stands to reason that some people can call Lolita pornography, and some people can call it, like, classic literature. Not classical. Classical and classic are two very different things.
Right.
But that's another
Give it
discussion.
a few hundred years, it'll be classical literature.
Exactly. Oh, more than that. But anyhow...
I don't know. Shakespeare's only 400 years old. He's classical.
I always thought classical referred to, like, Greek and Roman, like, the classics. Like, classical. Anyhow, speaking of semantics, sorry. I was talking to this with Blender just the other day about how I realized that I actually get, like, really offended and upset when people, like, say that I write porn, and I'm like, no, I don't. Like, not in my mind, I don't. And I got to thinking about this, and again, this sort of fits into the whole thing we're talking about, the way we write scenes now. And I'm noticing, and yes, I still will write scenes that are very heavily with the sex descriptions. The story I was talking about just now about, look, I have a 4,800 word sex scene, which is really actually very graphic. And when I reread it a couple of weeks ago for the first time in like a year and a half, I was like, wow, this is actually kind of hot.
I actually think you should write more sex, but you've been preoccupied with Time Dogs. So.
Yeah, but even when I do, like I said, like, and this has come up on the podcast a lot. When I sit down to write a sex story, very rarely do I end up with a sex story.
Right,
and
which is actually what our next question is about.
Yeah,
so.
And like what I end up doing is what I produce and what I sort of seem to have a tendency to write nowadays, and what I feel like I'm most interested in writing is not so much stories that I expect people to, like, read while jerking off to it, so much as stories that put sexy ideas in people's heads.
I will wager that you get somebody commenting when Summerhill comes out that they fap to it.
You know what? I feel weird enough, like, when people tell me that they did that to stories that are about people just having sex. Like, and actually, that was the other thing I was talking to Blender about. Like, people like, oh my god, like, I came so hard, and I'm just sort of like, you're welcome? Like, I don't know, like, what am I supposed to say?
I don't know what the response to that is either. I don't look at the counter on Yifstar at all. I'm sorry, so furry.
I turned mine off.
I don't turn it off. I think if people want to put it up there, then
I figure if people want to favorite my story, or if they want to leave a comment telling me what they thought, that's fine.
See, I kind of view this as a lightning rod, so that they don't have to leave a comment saying I came. They could just click the button, and then they don't have to write it, and I don't have to read it or look at it. So.
Yeah, but, like, I don't know. I guess, like, I just don't.
Because if you don't have the button enabled, they're going to write a comment being like, I wanted to tell you how much I came from this story, but you turned off the cum counter.
Well, you know what? If their orgasm was that special and memorable, then they'll take the effort. And you know what? Maybe we'll both appreciate it a lot more in the end for it. But, yeah, okay, so... Like, actually, I was talking to somebody who had an advanced copy of
What
Heat.
was the question?
It was about what's the difference
porn
between
versus
pornography
erotic.
and
Yeah, we're not talking about that.
No,
anymore.
no, we are. Because one of my friends who had an advanced copy of Heat because of contributions made, so I was like, I've read your story. And I was like, oh, yeah. And they're like, yeah, like, that was not what I expected. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I said, it's not one of these, like, you're going to read this and jerk off stories. And, like, I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing. And I don't think that makes it less erotic.
No, and that's kind of going back to the superhero book. I mean, I didn't write the stories. I didn't include sex in the stories to be hot. I included sex in the stories because I was interested in how superheroes, with their different abilities and all, cope with the biological mechanisms of having sex and how that affects their relationships. And which was, I don't remember
what happens if I put your dick in my mouth.
I don't remember if I particularly credited Larry Niven, but he wrote an essay called "Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex" about about how many different ways Superman would kill Lois Lane if they ever actually did have sex. And that was what
bag chicks with a kryptonite condom. That would kill them.
That was what inspired Third Date. Even though I took out most of the, I think I still left the condom part in. Yeah, it's interesting because the superheroes that I was rereading Don't Blink, and a couple of the heroes that I've mentioned that I did not write stories about may come in the next batch of stories, which will be less focused on sex and stuff, because they're like, Crypto Fox, the super nerd, clearly his superpower affects him having sex by making him completely uninterested in it. So there's not too much to write about there. And then
arousing genital contact. This would be satisfactory.
Oh God, Foos was showing me these Star Trek: The Next Generation parody.
Oh God,
clips.
Those are hilarious.
Which are apparently by the guy who does MS Paint Adventures.
Oh really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, because he uses. There's one. Did you see the one where Data is showing Picard the furry porn on the...
No?
Yes. And one of the images is the same as the image that's on the wall in one of the kids' rooms in Homestuck.
Oh, okay.
This is much later on. He actually has like 3 furries in that game now.
Oh, okay.
Which is really entertaining. MSPaintAdventures.com. Free plug. But who was the other one? Oh, Power Coyote, the one with the super obsessive compulsive disorder who can do telekinetic stuff. Again, he's telekinetic, so I'm sure that makes for some interesting sexual stuff, but he's also OCD, so I can't imagine him ever making it all the way through a session with another person. But maybe that's a story. And then Glass is the Arctic Fox vixen who has cold powers, and she's apparently a big tramp. But we've only heard that referred to, so I might have to do a story about her at some point too. Anyway, I don't remember the point of all that. Oh, just that the sex was not for fetishy purposes. It was because it was to focus on the aspects of the relationships. Because, how we handle sex is at the core of the relationships. So, I don't know.
I agree.
Are we done talking now?
No. Well, I mean, I think that we've sort of covered.
Okay.
But I mean, for as like, how is this going to affect you distributing things? If you just have text, it won't.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody's going to go. There's too much tongue in this blowjob scene. Change that. Like, you don't need to worry about that.
They would have to read your book first.
Yeah, and they won't.
No, they won't
Ever.
You want me to take the last one?
Yeah, because I had the long email.
The first one was long.
Yeah.
This is a quickie. Dear Messrs. Gold and Hirosaki, I have on occasion tried to write a simple FAP story. Nothing substantial, just a simple scene or two of characters doing something hot for the reader to get off on. But whenever I try to do this, I seem to get sidetracked into including stuff that distracts from it being a purely FAP story, such as plot and character development. Do you have anything to suggest in this regard? Cheers, not tube. Oh, I mean Storm Kitty.
Oh, Storm Kitty is my straight clone from another dimension, apparently, because he has the exact same problem I do.
Yeah, and Not Tube was talking to me about this also. That his porny story became all sort of character driven.
Which he just finished.
Yep. Congrats. Cheers to him.
He got fan art.
Clink.
I haven't gotten fan art in a while, I just noticed.
Aw.
I think the last person
Somebody
who did
out
me
there
fan
draw
art
some
was,
fan
I think
art
the last
for
person who
Cam.
did me fan art was Blender, and he took it down.
Aw.
Damn you, Blender. No,
Get on it, artists out there. Draw some fan art for Cam.
I don't know if anyone wants to write.
Draw fan art of his Heat story. Use all deep blue and violets and shadows and weeping.
Tears make for the sweetest lube.
I'll do you fan art. I'll just take a picture of a cemetery.
Oh, no. Kid is shaking his head in vehement disapproval.
Not vehement, more like, answer the damn question, people.
Honestly, this to me comes down to the matter of, like, what is the story that you're going to tell? Stories surprise us in all sorts of ways. Like, you sit down thinking you're going to write something, and it turns out to be completely different. I think this is just an extension of that.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, like, here's the sexy idea that you have, and I think that it's natural to want to, like, your brain is going to try to find ways to make it interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, like, just these characters fucked, like, it's not, like, that by itself, like, we've all read that story. We've all hopefully gotten over that story by the time we were, like, 16. Or 17.
Or 18, when we were allowed to rent movies.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, I assume by the time you're 16, you at least have, like, 3 solid years of jerking off under your belt that, like, you've started to develop more elaborate fantasies even in your own head.
Remember that some of us did not grow up with the internet.
I didn't grow up with the internet either.
I'm just saying.
A
few of us did not have readily available porn at our fingertips.
Neither did I.
These days do.
No, I didn't either. But my point is that even when you're a teenager, you're coming up with scenarios in your head that are more than just, like, you need the story behind it to make it interesting. Like, regardless.
Actually, my teenager porn was Piers Anthony, so. That kid's nodding knowingly. Piers Anthony actually, just sort of quick diversion to people who claim that furry fiction is too adult. In a story collection not marked adult or for mature readers, Piers Anthony had a story called, I believe, Minnie's Crew, which, if you run it all together, tells you more about the content of the book, in which in which the entire story was this group of, like, really tiny people like brownies, and one particular woman called Minnie who gets a human off. Just like it's a sex story between a normal-sized human and a brownie, and the fact that she can fit him. And I'm like, this was right in the middle of an anthology of science fiction and fantasy stories. And all right then, you go, Piers. So Kit tells us about Piers Anthony, real briefly in case the mics didn't pick that up. Kit says Piers Anthony had one book, which I don't believe I remembered reading, about a guy who could transport into other bodies or send his consciousness into other bodies, and basically he goes around to alien worlds and has alien sex for the whole book.
Katy Perry.
Do you remember the title of that? Okay, he's looking it up for the show notes. I do not remember the name of the anthology, sadly, that Piers Anthony story was in. But
I'm sure it's easily enough Googled.
Yeah, Google Minnie's Crew, MINNIE''S. I was going to suggest the other thing you can do is you don't necessarily have to continue the same story. You can write the sex scene and put hints in there to the nature of the characters, and kind of leave people hanging, and then say, well, these are interesting characters. I'm going to write a story about them that isn't just all about sex. And sort of, so you've got your sex story for getting off, and then that might conflict you a little less if you separate it out. And you can always include sex in a larger story.
Isn't that basically what you did with your Jason and Trey stuff? Kind of, sort of.
But they never really got their own story. They never got a big one.
But I mean, like, you basically had here's their first story where, hey, you meet and you have sex, and it's hot.
And you have sex, and you have sex, and you have sex. I think there were 4 different ways. Did I ever tell you the origin of that one?
You did. I don't know if you want to talk about it on the show or not.
I'll save it for another time. Okay. People can ask me. But they were just a fun couple, so they kind of recur. But I use them for hey, it would be funny to write this story about this happening to a couple who has sex.
Yeah.
And I just bring them in, so that all we ever see of them is having sex. Even the cameo they have in Snow Days, basically they go off and have public sex in the forest somewhere.
They have sex in the woods a lot, don't they? More than once.
At least more than once. And the one I just released is another one that has lots of sex but no actual sex in it.
Yeah.
Kit is making us guess
20.
how many Xanth books Pierce Anthony has written.
I'm gonna say like 28.
I'm gonna say 25.
Wow. No,
he is still writing them at number 36.
Once a year, a book comes out.
What's the title?
Luck of the Draw.
Luck of the Draw. Wow, he's not even trying anymore.
Yeah, that's not even a pun. That's just a turn of phrase.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it's a pun related to something or another.
Yeah,
it's like a magical Pictionary game or something. But, man, I started. When did I start reading them? The 4th or 5th had just come out.
Wow. Yeah.
I know, because I read them for a few years, and then I stopped when the 10th one came out.
You're like, so when you're at like your 36th book in a series, it really just must be like, and Piers Anthony needs a paycheck. You're like, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Whatever.
You know, honestly, given how popular those books are, if I could make money, and I'm sure it doesn't take him more than a couple months to write one of those. And I'm basing that not on necessarily on the complexity of the books, but on how prolific I know he is as an author. Because back before he was writing Xanth, he wrote, like, I don't know if you remember all those other books that he'd written, but he wrote the Split Infinity series, which are actually really cool and still one of my favorite fantasy trilogies. Bio of a Space Tyrant, he wrote the Thousand Star books, he wrote the Incarnations of Immortality books.
Right.
He wrote a bunch of other stuff, and he was putting out, like, just tons of books. He's been writing forever. And I think he's just gotten to the point where he's like, my job is to write Xanth books, and I'm sure he's doing some other stuff on the side that he's interested in, and he's just like, I'll churn out a Xanth book, because why not?
Because it is expected. But actually, to build off of what you were saying just now about how here's like Jason and Trey, and they're sort of here are my characters for when I need to write about something, like happening to, folks that sort of have a pre-established thing. That's actually by the time this episode goes up, this story is actually probably going to be online. I'm trying to finish my first draft of it before Anthrocon, and it's not a terribly long story, so I'm sure the editing will go quickly. But I'm trying to, reintroduce the concept of having recurring flagship characters that belong to an author that people can sort of follow. Mm-hmm. This is my story. I'm bringing back Gareth for this story, which I mentioned on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. Woo! Because everyone loved Gareth. Everyone did love Gareth.
Yeah.
And he's only in like one quick scene, but it's just sort of like, I guess it's a testament that he's very memorable.
Really write slutty coyotes.
The big long sex scene that I wrote about was about a slutty coyote too. I remember our Unfurled interview where we were talking about how like nobody but us really writes about coyotes very much.
Yeah.
Why is that, I wonder? Why are we the only people who know that coyotes are sexy?
Actually, is the one thing that I was talking about having written recently is a coyote.
Oh, there you go.
My story, which will be unveiled probably sometime this fall. I'm going to try doing one of those serial things where people get to vote on not necessarily what happens next, but I think I'm going to generalize it and make it which character to follow next.
Ooh. Interesting.
And like the way some people have done it online is they'll have PayPal links for each of the voting options. Oh. And then whichever one gets the highest total by a certain time period is the winner. And you could vote with like $1. So it's not that big a deal. So
that's kind of cool.
So I think I'm going to try that as sort of another...
I would legally need to claim that as earnings, but yes.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I mean, that's my job now, so I'm trying to find ways that aren't, too like gold digging, money grubbing.
Yeah.
Sort of.
No, but I mean that works. I mean, like $1 to enjoy a story. Come on.
Yeah.
You pay. That's like a third of a cup of coffee. Come on, people.
Right. And if you don't feel strongly about it, you don't have to vote.
Yeah.
Some people do. So I figure I'll make $5 a section on it.
Hey, you know what? If enough people care, There you go. Because I was thinking, because I made a thing the other day about if I did a story auction, how that would go. But
how was the response to that?
I didn't get a lot of responses, but people said that it seemed like a good idea. Actually, most people said, "Oh, I probably wouldn't be able to afford to win," and I'm like, I don't think you really quite appreciate the fact that you would not be bidding against that many people.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've kicked around that idea too, but the nice thing about doing something like this, where it would be just sort of by segments and then people could vote, is, at the end of it, I have more creative freedom with the story, and at the end of it, it's my story to do something with.
Right.
Doing a commissioned story, the problem is that takes up a chunk of time.
Yeah.
And then it ends up being a story that I don't necessarily have the rights to do anything further with. So,
and you have to work on it.
And you have the obligation to work on it. So, it's I've kind of avoided going down that road. If somebody came to me with an offer I couldn't refuse, but so far nobody has.
How many digits is in that number, I wonder?
Well, I mean, figure it would. I calculate it out by how long it would take me to write the story. If it was a short story and I could do it in a week, then you would have to pay me to not work on anything else in the week.
Yeah.
If it was a longer story that would take me a month, then you would have to pay me to not work on anything else for a month.
Pay my month's expenses.
Yeah.
Like exactly. A real job.
Exactly.
Speaking of which, I don't think I told the podcast that I do have a real job again now.
Woohoo.
Because we had mentioned a year after the fact that I was unemployed. I won't tell you what I'm doing, but I am working again, and it's working out very well.
Awesome. And we're very happy.
Yes.
So speaking of being writers.
Yes.
We have examples of pitches that we wrote, which, as far as I know, Kit has not cast his eyes over yet. So perhaps if he's going to listen in, we can get a little bit more feedback from him. I know he wasn't planning on talking on this episode, but maybe if once we're done, he can kind of say, do things like this, do things a little less like that. Don't do what Kyle did, but under any circumstances.
Oh, the kid is frowning now.
Do not put the word cock in your pitch, unless it's a story about a rooster, like the Book of the Dun Cow
or Rockadoodle.
Yeah. Do you want me to go first since I have two, or do you want to do yours and then I'll do mine?
You know what? Why don't you do one of yours and I'll do mine, and then you can do your other one?
Okay.
That way we can hear your dusky dulcets broken out.
Ooh. So I did.
Do it in your Laura Macaulay voice.
I'll do my first pitch in that voice.
You don't actually have to.
I did a pitch for Out of Position, and then I did a pitch for the first book of the Collations trilogy.
Okay.
So I'm going to do my Out of Position pitch first. This is a novel in 5 parts. The story of Dev and Lee, a tiger and a fox coping with their growing feelings for each other. Dev, the tiger, is a football player in college when they meet. Lee, the fox, is a gay activist in drag, trying to trap a jock into a gay experience. The first 2 parts of the novel detail Dev coming to grips with his gay experience. The third and fourth delve into Lee's past and reveal some of his own problems. In the last, largest part, Dev faces a challenge from one of Lee's former friends who threatens to expose the pair's relationship to the media. Dev has to decide what is most important to him and choose his course of action. Out of Position is written in a very close, first-person style, spending a lot of time in the heads of the main characters. The focus is on Dev's search for his identity and what his love for Lee means to him as a person. Lee's conflict at being in a closeted romance after all his time spent advancing gay rights is also explored.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I should specify that the book contains adult scenes of sex, but...
Adult scenes of an adult nature.
Adult scenes of an adult sexual nature between 2 sexual consenting adults having sex.
Having sex with their sexes.
He put his sex in their sex. Maybe it's like a hive mind, and it only has one sex.
So just to do a little bit of a quick caveat here, I framed mine as a very fandom specific sort of pitch, because I think that's what a lot of people will be interested in. So it's only a little different, and I think you'll see what I mean. But so here's mine. This is my pitch for Summerhill. Summerhill is a science fiction adventure story. It's not a strictly furry novel in the sense that a lot of fandom creative works are, but there are definite strong furry elements to it, and I think it's something that the furry reader base would very much enjoy and appreciate. The story revolves around Summerhill, who is an unusual anthropomorphic dog creature who escapes from this surreal prison with no memory of who he is, and his only clue is to find a woman named Catherine. When he finds her, though, it turns out that she herself is a wanted criminal, and the two of them end up on the run together, sort of unwittingly and unexpectedly forced into helping each other out in their respective journeys. It's a story with a whimsical premise, but it isn't silly. The characters travel to a number of different worlds, each with their own supporting cast and unique scenery, some more grounded in reality and others much more surreal and fantastical. It is also a time travel story, but the narrative itself is still linear, and there isn't any gimmick that's involved around trying to keep track of the story flow. Overall, it's around 90,000 words, fairly briskly paced, and it's full of a lot of unique and different ideas that I don't think have really been seen explored in fandom created furry fiction so far.
Cool. And then my second pitch is for the first novel of the Calations trilogy, which is called The Tower and the Fox. This is the first novel in a trilogy that takes place in an alternate 1815 in Massachusetts at the Prince George's College of Sorcery. One of the most striking differences in this world is the presence of a small population of animal people called Calations, created 400 years ago by magic. Their magical nature makes them useful to sorcerers as reservoirs of power. Under the sorcerer's protection, Calations have created small communities in many cities across Mother England and the colonies. The Tower and the Fox begins with a mysterious attack on the college, leaving only its oldest building, the White Tower, intact. All the students are killed, leaving the college so desperate to recruit new ones that they enroll Kip and Copy, a fox and otter, as the first Calations to enter the college as students, as well as Emily, the first woman admitted to the college. They are surrounded by other mysteries, a book that only Kip can remember, the White Tower itself, which seems to be responsible for surges of magical power, a strange apprentice who lives in the orchard, the only non-master to survive the attacks, and the mystery of how the White Tower survived when the other buildings around it fell. In the first book, the three friends must overcome bullies and prejudice to prove that they deserve to remain at the college and study magic. In the rest of the trilogy, they will unravel many of the mysteries, ending with a trip to London and the largest Calatian community to discover more about the place of Calations and themselves in the world. The books are written in a moderately paced adventure style with elements of Harry Potter and Stephen King. So, Kit, any comments on... Nope? Okay.
He's shaking his white whiskery muscle no.
He says...
May add,
Okay. He says he will add some notes when we do get the episode posted for the benefit of the listeners. So overall, I mean, that's what we're looking for with pitches. Just describe your project.
Yeah.
Describe not just the story, but how it's written. I liked your thing of who it would appeal to.
Oh, thank you.
And make it short.
Yeah, don't over-explain it. I think that...
Right.
Yeah.
Don't
I
start.
almost think I didn't go into enough detail after hearing what you went into, but... Right.
Well, the thing with the second book is, in order to understand why it's important that the main character is a fox, you have to kind of explain at least a little bit of the background of the world and what that whole structure is. So getting that down to like 2 sentences is difficult. Yeah. But necessary.
Also, my main character has amnesia, so explaining the deal with him is kind of a giant spoiler.
Right. But anyway.
But yeah, I'm actually looking forward to seeing what we're going to get.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun.
I know we have a lot of really creative people who listen to the show.
Yeah.
And we should tweet to say, make sure you listen to episode 85.
Yes.
Before listen when it comes out. Skip if you're 20 episodes behind, skip it and listen to this one so that you don't miss out.
Yeah. Also, there's a lot of sex talk in episode 85. So,
do you want to hear us talk about blowjobs and topping and bottoming for like an hour? Episode 85.
But I think we're at that point now.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap it up. Please write into the podcast at unsheathedpodcast@gmail.com. Is that where you want them to send the pitches also? Okay. They're sending MP3 files there. Yes.
I'll send it.
So Kit's going to post how to mail in your pitches.
Yeah, there's and I'm sure you can recommend audio programs to use if you don't have them already.
But, yep, send in other questions to that. If you'd like to follow us on Twitter or LiveJournal or Fur Affinity, I am Kyle Gold, Kyell Gold on Twitter and LiveJournal, and just Kyle on Fur Affinity.
And I am Cam Hirosaki on all three of those.
And thank you for your questions, as always. We appreciate your contributions and enjoyed having the discussions.
Yeah, a lot of good email discussion this week. I think that the email discussion flow was very natural this week.
Yeah, I think it was good. I went back to trying to have a themed show because we hadn't had adult questions in a while, and we had a few of them kicking around.
And it was something that was fresh in my mind just based on what I had been talking about lately, so it was good.
Yeah.
So I'd already pre-thought it. I had pre-gamed this episode accidentally.
Awesome. Take care, everyone. Good night, and keep writing.